Fighting against injustice across Connecticut, Melissa in the Morning checks in with the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities on WICC 600.
Good morning. So if you look at Public Allies Connecticut, they are actually developing leaders for the nonprofit sector and developing new ways to drive impact to our surrounding communities. Their mission is to create a just and equitable society and the diverse leadership to sustain it. And to talk a little bit more about allyship is Jody Walker Smith back on the show this morning. Good morning, Jody. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So can we actually just start, Jody, with unpacking what does it really mean to be an ally?
Yeah, it's a great question because, dictionary.com's 2021 word of the year was allyship. I think it's a topic on a lot of our minds, especially in the last 2 years as folks have been grappling with what it means to be human and social creatures during a pandemic. And then all of the social justice efforts that folks are being exposed to. People are wondering, what does it really mean to be an ally, and how can I best show up without unintentionally causing further harm? And so typically you would think of allyship as someone who is helping someone else or group that they're not a part of. And so, typical examples could be someone without a disability speaking up to ensure that those with disabilities have meaningful access. Or it could be a cisgender heterosexual person standing up for LGBTQ rights, or a white person showing up for racial justice. What's typically missing, though, is kind of the nuance of understanding that to be a true ally is to work with and follow the lead of the marginalized person or group. There's an activist named Lila Watson that puts it so perfectly. She says, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And so I think the most important thing to think about is really that being an ally is a practice that is equalizing. It's not helping from a place of altruism or pity. It's a helping from a place of common humanity.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing that stands out to me personally, Jody, is, for example, like my brother is autistic. So growing up, we always found ourselves, advocating, supporting nonprofits, for example, like Wolfgang and Co. out of Fairfield, Connecticut, where they employ adults with special needs who can't otherwise get a job, and it teaches them job training, for example. Is that what you're talking about with allyship? Is that what you mean?
That is one way that someone can practice allyship, definitely. I think there are many ways that we can do this. We can educate ourselves about the topic, depending on which community we're attempting to be an allyship with. We can speak up when we witness individual acts of marginalization. We can advocate for programs like you're speaking of. We can notice who's included or excluded and who's centered. We can challenge the status quo. We can, advocate for policies and practices and laws that eradicate systems of marginalization, and we can make space. You might have heard there was a social media campaign a few years ago to pass the mic, and that's kind of a phrase that has bigger meaning. When you're a real ally, you're not just speaking for a community. You're using your power and access and privilege to expand the room and the space so that the community can speak for themselves. And so that is a way that we can really, truly be allies. Performing allyship is more about trying to influence how people think of ourselves as opposed to trying to eliminate systemic marginalization.
We're talking to Jody Walker Smith this morning of the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, talking about allyship. So, Jody, in the beginning of this conversation, you had mentioned a key part of this, which is becoming an ally without making the problem worse. And I'm curious, if somebody were listening right now, they feel passionate about something and either have become or want to become an ally, how do you make sure you don't cross a line? If you're standing up for something you really believe in, you're supporting something you can really connect to, but you, like you said, you don't want to make the issue worse at hand, or you don't want to incite things like violence. How do you do that without pressing that envelope?
That's That's the key question, Melissa. I think that there's a few things we can do. One, of course, is educating ourselves and not just jumping into action, because the more that we know, the more we can make sure our actions align with what that particular person or group needs. Most importantly, though, we follow the lead of whatever person or group we're trying to be an ally to. So I don't need to, as someone who does not currently experience a disability, I don't need to lead disability efforts. I can look to people who are doing that work, that experience that way of operating in the world and know better from firsthand experience what they need. And I can try to leverage my access and whatever assets I have in order to further that. A couple other things that we can try to avoid are some concepts. One is called saviorism, and you can imagine that shows up when someone isn't really reflecting on why they're doing what they're doing. And so, as I said at the outset, we want to be acting from a place of working together as equals, not working in place of. So if you're speaking for a marginalized group instead of expanding the room or perpetuating stereotypes. And then another one is thinking that we're an exception. So, I might have the best of intentions and want to do well in the world and care about humanity. But I still have to acknowledge that I have implicit biases that I need to reflect on, and I need to continuously reflect on and think about and try to excavate those implicit biases to make sure that I'm not showing up in the world and in my relationships in a way that is inconsistent with how I actually intend to be. And we're going to make mistakes. I think that that's important to acknowledge too. Everyone is going to make mistakes in their efforts to be allies, but being an ally is a practice. It's not an identity you can either claim or disclaim or have forever. What you do in any given moment is what matters. And so we learn, we realize when we make mistakes, and we apologize, and we follow the lead of the people that have the firsthand experience.
Well, a great conversation, and certainly for anyone who's just learning about allyship, a great starting point as well. Jody Walker Smith, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.